What's up, everybody? Timber Builds back and grounded once again. Finally doing the Pagoda Base build guide. This is not going to be a one-for-one recreation of the entire base. It's too big. It took me over a year to get that thing fully built. It's been over a year since I finished some of that stuff. So I don't like the idea of just handing you something to copy piece for piece. I want to help you get the foundations built, do some of the trickier parts of this base, and then create something that you can go and turn into your own sort of masterpiece of a build. And so if I can help people by getting the simple like beginning stuff, which is the hard part of this base, is building off grid. If you haven't done it, it's fairly simple at the end of the day, but it is confusing and a bit finicky. Again, this is the most important part of this build, so being very slow and methodical here is absolutely going to result in a better end result for this base. If you are someone who is very picky about how things are going to line up, the hardest thing about building off grid is making sure things line up, because you have to be much more prepared than just building on a grid, because you're trying to get things to line up at the end of the day. And so the whole goal here is to get as perfectly parallel to each one of these individual walls, because the Pagoda Base this will be one wall, this, and so on and so forth. Each individual wall or side of the pagoda is built completely on its own grid, and that is what makes it so interesting. You physically cannot turn these in any way, shape, or form that will allow you to match the grid perfectly. They are all slightly off. If you can see, they don't allow for quite the same ability. So you want to come in here. I did this whole thing with grass originally. So if you don't have the burr blocks, you can do it with grass. I did it. I proved it. It is harder because, as you can see, the grass blocks have some variation. They're not perfect. And then there's no guide to sort of line things up on, whereas the burr floors give you a bit of a middle point here, a bit of a middle point here, and they're perfectly parallel. So if you have burr blocks unlocked by scanning spiky burrs, then I would highly suggest that you go ahead and start with those. Let's go ahead and make a day real quick, and then we will get started. But yeah, as I said, goal here, perfectionism. I don't love using the idea of perfectionism because it's the lowest standard you can shoot for. Perfection's impossible. But in this specific scenario, as close to perfect as possible is what you want to do, because you'll get better results in the long run. So we're going to start. I like using the walls themselves, grabbing a half floor. You line it up as best as you possibly can. This is a lot easier on PC because you have a little bit more ability to rotate with the scroll wheel and Q&E. If you are a Xbox or PlayStation or Switch player, you might have to mess with this a little bit longer. But I promise I've helped people build on console, and they've been able to do it. So you can see here, we're so close to perfect. As you can see, this is almost working. You could probably sit here and finagle this thing for 6 years. For the purposes of the video, this is going to be close enough for the vast majority of people. The next goal is you're going to come in and you want to get this block placed as perfectly center as you can. This is a very important detail. The way I like to do this is giving a quick little copy, bringing that over. Now I've saved the orientation for this. So if I kind of come in here and something gets messed up, I always have this backup piece that I can just copy and bring back over. That's just a little safety thing. I'm building in creative at the moment, so it's a little bit different. But if you get it perfectly lined up, just give yourself a little block that's moved away, so you have something to pull back if you screw up the angle, or you do something like this. With this piece, and you accidentally rotate it, and then you're like, oh my gosh, now I have to go line it up. You're good to go. Come over, grab it again, and you just sit here and mess with this. The key being to get the exact way that I built this. You want mushroom walls is what I do. You're going to want the inner wall to be just inside of the cement So then you can come in and do this. And you can see, okay, so we're just proud. You can have a little bit of your own creative freedom here. It's not super important. The goal for me was that this concrete sort of pattern showed outside of the mushroom, and the mushroom just became like a block that infills this. But this is all you're doing, and it's that simple, honestly. Once you get that first block placed correctly, this is all this is. This is all I did. You're just going to build a single wall. I actually built this before they had the vertical half walls and stuff. Now it's even easier because you can just do that. I had to use full blocks and sort of make it look like these things were doing. The things I was hoping for. I will suggest sometimes it's better to use the half blocks, especially if you want to build the little trays or shelves that I did. Sometimes they are a little finicky in the corners is where that gets a little weird. So if you're having trouble placing stuff in these corners, I'd suggest going back to a half block, because sometimes when the blocks want to clip in the corners, they just act a little funny with the full blocks because there's technically not a break in these. So if you're trying to do like this block is not going to allow me, because it's a full block, it's not going to let me place this inside there. Whereas these half ones, now it lets me, because these are just half walls. And so that break in between them allows you to do a couple things. And in some of the later details of this base, that becomes important, not as important right off the bat. And then you can kind of create the doors however you want. This is the rough sort of way I did this. You just use the little half walls, vertical half walls, and that's all it is. It's just a simple little shelf system. These kind of clip into the pagoda itself. This is where you're going to hide all your mistakes and details. If you plan on building similar to how my base is built, where things start coming out, that's where it tends to get a little more complicated, and the precision in placing that first block becomes exponentially more important. If this is not centered, which, I mean, you can definitely see mine is just slightly off. For the most people, that's going to be totally fine. If you are a perfectionist, when you get to that outer level, things will not work the way you're hoping, and I can show you that in a second. So let's go ahead and get this second wall built. I did a little pre-placement here just so I didn't have to run around too much. I'm going to go just slightly proud. That's pretty close to centered. And then it's the same thing. So for me, I did not build a door on every side. So you can build, I have a door on this side and a door here, and then everything else is completely enclosed. You get to do whatever you want to do at the end of the day with this now. But I will continue to show sort of roughly what my structure sort of ended up like, and I'll do a little bit of the detailing, but we'll keep it fairly quick and simple, because at the end of the day, that's easier to do, and I think it'll allow other people to have fun and do what they want. The corners do get a little funny. They, as you saw, if you don't place some blocks before, they want to pop to each other. When you get all the way around, that is where it starts to get more difficult. The last wall, things want to clip to each other, so just be prepared that the further you get, the more annoying this might end up being. Have a little patience. I guarantee you'll do it. You'll get there. I built this completely on a whim, thinking, hey, you know, maybe this idea will work. Always hard to tell. Don't know why that's not doing that. I did build this base previously at one point and had to tear it all down, so some of these things might be a little bit funky because I missed some blocks that are clipping inside the pagoda is all that really is. If it's your first time building in the pagoda, it won't be an issue. But I have done some extra stuff. Oops. Again, all we're doing is building sort of a rough outline for this. Doesn't really matter how perfect. The floors and stuff you'll figure out as you go. We'll just ignore that piece. And you're just going to rinse and repeat this. If you want to build my little structure here, course, I am in creative, so things are a little funky. We can come get a crafting station, if I can figure out where it is. It's one of the things around here. I probably already passed it. I don't even remember where it is. I haven't built. There it is. And you'll rotate that around. You might be able... Yeah, I didn't think. If you want it perfect, you got to place it off the... without the snaps on. But that's all that is. The chests are very simple. I'm a big pine cone chest fan. I think they look quite wonderful. They are finicky as all can be. If you're too close, they sometimes don't work. If you're too far away, sometimes they won't work. So you're going to have to move back and forth here to get these placed right. You can place them as simple as this. I don't think everyone needs quite as many chests as I probably have. So you can do something like that. Or if you want to stick with maybe more what I did, I placed everything to allow for more chests 90 degrees compared to this, or perpendicular to the wall. And that was my sort of the way I wanted to do it. It just allows you to get a couple more chests in. Nothing crazy. Again, make sure you, if you're having trouble getting these to place properly, adjust the way you're looking at them. Sometimes you need to be at a higher angle. Sometimes you need to be at a lower angle, especially for these bottom ones. If you're too high, they just want to pop up to this upper shelf. So you got to get really low to get these ones to place right. And luckily, not all that difficult. If you make sure to copy the one that you've already placed, don't rotate it. You'll get them all to be perfectly parallel to one another, so you don't end up with chests that are all wonky and all over the place. But that's all it is, and it's just now a continuation, a rinse and repeat of this process over and over again. So we're just going to speed build right on through this, and I'll catch you guys once this part is done. One other keynote I will mention here, depending on if you see the little red dot here, you're not going to be able to get these to place parallel very easily using the red dot on this side. I'm going to get these rotated so they sort of allow you to get slightly closer to this wall. As I said before, this is where it can get really difficult. If you're struggling with this, just go in here, delete these little pieces, and that will make it so this piece doesn't really have anything to clip to, and then it'll allow you to sort of get back in here and do what you need to do. All right, now we're gonna get to another slightly complicated part here. If you just want to build inside the pagoda, you now have a blank slate to go crazy. All I did was come over and take some stairs on my original build. I think I did 1.5 blocks. So if you count this as one right there as the standard ceiling height, whatever you want to do, really doesn't matter at this point. It's whatever interests you. That's all. That's all I did. Is there's a set of stairs. I think if I'm really looking at what I did, might have gone 2 blocks out maybe, if you really want to like copy it exactly. But I think you have a blank slate now, and you can kind of do whatever you want. Mine is cool and fun, but I think there's about a million different ways that you could build this base, and so whatever you come up with, whatever you like, is going to work for you at the end of the day. You can do something like this, and that's your set of stairs. You can build your stairs. The key being here, I've had quite a few people struggle with this part, is you want to pick one wall. It does not matter which wall you pick. They're all exactly the same. It just depends on the orientation. I always thought of this base as this is the front, this is the back. That was just my mentality around it. However you want to build it, is you are free to do so. It makes no difference what side you pick. But pick one side, because if you build your floors on connected to each side, such as this, you're going to get these really ugly overlaying patterns that are probably going to drive you insane. I was not a fan when I did it like this originally, so I ended up having to change the whole thing. And it's just a lot more annoying overall. So I would avoid building off of one wall, or building off of every wall, and just pick one. And that is the wall now that you will use, essentially, is the way I liked to think of it. Also allows you to then clip into the walls around it, and it hides your mistakes, is a big reason for that. Then there's some pieces where you're going to have to use maybe some of these floors. You're going to have to pick a triangle floor like this to fill in that block. Some of them are just going to work like that. So just do it. This is where you want to go in and out of the base as much as you can. We'll get to this in a second. You just want to make sure that these aren't clipping through to the outside so you can see them. The great thing is if you want, like in my base, this is where an entrance is. If you're not interested in having your entrances on that side and that side, you don't have to. You definitely do not have to copy mine exactly. So you could put the entrance there if you want. You could put your main entrance here because it's blown out and broken already. This side is a little finicky and a bit annoying, but as you have sort of the basis of design now, we can go ahead and get this elevator set up. The struggle here is now you have everything built, so you're probably going to want to go back and maybe delete a couple of these blocks. Sometimes it clips to the, it wants to snap to the ceiling, so probably avoid doing the floor like I just did. I just wanted to show that off before I went too much further. You want to get your walls placed properly and then start adding other things in, so you don't end up doing exactly what I'm doing, but I'm glad I can show that off for people. Specifically, this wall is annoying because you lose the reference point of a center, because now the center is now, if you're looking at it, here. So you have to sort of estimate how that's going to work. And so this is the trickiest side, in my opinion. It's also more likely, if you save it for last, it's just going to be more difficult to get it to not clip to things and be weird. Very hard to get a visual reference. Sometimes you can sort of do that. It's a difficult one. This side is where I think I had the biggest struggles, and you got to just do the best you can do. If you're absolute perfectionist, you can come in, use your center block, and be like, hey, for first try, you know, that's pretty dead on, if I do say so myself. I would say that is almost as close. We're maybe just a tad bit further on that side. But for the purposes of this video, that is absolutely good enough. Again, if you don't like things not lining up perfectly and you want to build outside, be particular here. You can't spend too much time working on this part of the base, in my opinion. It is absolutely where all of your time should be spent, is getting these lined up properly. If you don't get them lined up, I can't tell you. I have had, at this point, 60... There's someone on my Discord, one of my mods, that has helped people rebuild this base piece by piece, getting them started on this exact thing. And he's probably helped 60 people, he said, at this point, get this started. He just goes in and helps them. So that is a great resource, Velocity, on my my Discord. He's the mod for the channel. Ask him if you're really struggling. Hopefully this video is detailed enough that you can sort of figure it out from here. And if not, there are resources to help you. Now, this is where I sort of changed things up a bit, because for those of you who just want to build this part of the pagoda, you're done. You fill that with however much you want. You build your floors. I used these center pieces in upper floors, same way as the bottom, to sort of create extra little balcony spaces. They're a little weird, but I think with enough effort, you can create a little entrance. You just have to figure out how you're going to get your stairs up, and there's a million different ways to do it. I built all my stairs on this same grid using the back wall just because I thought it was the easiest. So they essentially go like this, and then did a little bit of that. So it's personal preference how you want to do this. Stairs can go like that. You could get a little crazy and start working on getting things clipped similar to like this. So now you have this sort of spot. This is where the Pagoda Base gets really fun. Once you've done this little bit of work to get these outer walls, you can now build off of any of them for certain parts, and you can undo or stick to one grid. So you can build on this single grid of floor. You can go crazy. It's whatever you want. Whatever your creativity is the only limiting factor at this point now, because you can go crazy, and having multiple grids allows you to just place a stair like that. I will say, if you are an absolute perfectionist, this base might not be your cup of tea. Because things are not perfect in it. You're hiding a lot of details. You're fixing things in the corner to work. So it all depends on your personal preference. But I think it does allow for some really cool builds. And there's some people that have taken my build and just done some incredible things. But, I mean, you could come up here, delete this floor, maybe this floor, and you can start doing some craziness, whatever it is. This is where you can also, if you get it working correctly, you can start doing things like this and use these floors to sort of line each other up. Building off of this grid, you do end up with these weird little clips, but if you're okay with that, you can do some incredible things with this base. And that's already a stair that I'm like, I kind of wish I did that stair on my base originally. The next important thing is the elevator, as I was talking about. For the people that want to go all the way to the top like I did, this is where it's exponentially more difficult. You could build an exterior elevator. You can do whatever you want. If you want to follow exactly what I did, look up a video on how to make a bounce tower. They're incredibly easy. They really are easy. Let's get this just laid out, and then we'll get into that portion. Then we'll just come back, delete that. Now that I think about it, that did break it, dang it. That is okay. It's a little finicky being in creative mode. I don't feel like I had this many weird things happening in the survival mode when I originally built my base. Is that one off? Yeah. Get there and there. You don't necessarily have to be this particular. That's just a me thing at the end of the day. What just happened? I didn't even destroy anything. Huh? That was very weird. What is breaking here? Sorry about this. I think something's off with the building integrity. Let's see now. Alright, that's gonna work. I had some weird setting on. That's not normal. Okay, so now you got that whole wall built out. You could fill this in. Looking great. Get that in there. Now, you just need some type of elevator shaft. Doesn't have to be anything incredibly cool. It depends on how interested you are in getting to the top. All I really did was, say, probably went about there. I'm just sort of freeballing this at this point. Doesn't have to be an exact replica of mine. Honestly, I think mine, if I went back, I'd probably make some changes to it at the end of the day. So you can do, I think I used some rounded walls like this on the outside. Maybe I think it was just like this. Something like here. And that's where you can take the images off of my Discord and sort of recreate it to your level of detail. This is not necessarily something that has to be done in an exact particular way. If you don't know how to make a bounce tower, I will say I ended up having to change a lot of my stuff. They adjusted the mushroom blocks, so they are no longer necessarily like a flat, perfect thing. So if you see this little block here, when you're bouncing up, it'll shoot you off. So I would recommend potentially in this scenario going with ash cement. I've had good luck with. The grass is not too bad. I've seen some people use stem walls. I didn't have a lot of luck. I know ash cement's really expensive, so it doesn't necessarily work for everyone. But your goal then is you place a wall, and you're going to come in this flat edge. If you look at the bounce web here, there's one flat edge. You want to push that flat edge till it's nearly through. And then you can come test now. If this shoots you up, you've now done it correct. And now it's just rinse and repeat on that fact. Let's go make it day real fast. The correct way now, the best way I found of doing this is you want to typically go 3 blocks up. I think you can push them a little further, but in my opinion, you just end up with a slightly worse bounce tower overall. But it's the same concept. You're going to take a floor, you're going to do this. Always place your walls first. That is a major point. You want to place the wall and then clip the bounce web into it. That is a big point you need to do, or else this won't work properly. Order of operations matters a lot here. And this is where you're going to be doing a lot of a back and forth. So you're going to bounce up, you're going to bounce up. I like testing each level. If you've done this a bunch of times, go over here actually. If you've done this a bunch, you've made bounce webs, bounce web elevators, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I also would say sometimes these placing walls like this, once the bounce webs are down already, like that, this is a perfect example. This is why you want to place your walls first, because then later on, you're going to have to come back and do this whole thing over. So you want to get everything placed as perfectly as you can, and then do the webs, the bounce webs. And this is just a rinse and repeat process. 3 up, 3 over, 3 down. 1, 2, 3. Over and over again. You can go as high as you want. With this part, sort of depends on how you want this to look. Sometimes, let's see here. So now we're going to want to do the next step. I am a crow feather fanatic, so we will stick with crow feathers just because that's what I like. Doesn't matter at all. I think we could go maybe a little higher. I think we should go a little higher. So let's do 1, 2, and this is going to get you going to this height. You're not going to run into any weird issues, which you'll see in a second. It also is going to look just a little bit better. And then having this final one be only too high is going to give you enough bounce power to hit your head on this, and it's going to push you outwards. And this is where this is the worst part. Maybe even just one. I think it's just one is going to be better. At about a 1.5 block height. So you can go like this. Just needs to go out far enough that you are out past the pagoda ledge here. You just have to get far enough that you can come up and then go back around. So in theory, you're going to... Mine doesn't necessarily have all of this. I did something a little more like this. So then you can come in and it kind of encloses the structure a little bit. This is where your creativity can come in and you can do whatever you want. That's a weird detail that I didn't know you could do. Thank you, Grounded, for being funny. I think mine was built just one block bigger than this, most likely. Yeah, I think all of these are... If you want an exact carbon copy, I think this is how mine are placed. Yeah. And it's a visual thing. It means nothing else outside of the look at this point. This will not affect anything else. You just don't end up with this weird overlapping structure. That's kind of funny. It's kind of a fun detail if you like it. So you can definitely have fun with this base for sure. We got some of this, some of that, and then you can close in the backspace however you see fit. As long as you end up with this sort of rough structure, you'll be fine. The bounce web is all that really matters here. The rest of it is just a preference of detail. So you could make these any material now for the walls. We'll just stick with mushroom because it's simple. I'd probably suggest not doing what I just did, at least leaving maybe one of these out. Because now what you're going to do is become a human ping pong ball. You are going to just come in here. And you're going to be, okay, go bounce, bounce, bounce. And it works. And then you're going to go, okay, I landed right here. You're going to grab your little bounce web. Doesn't really matter necessarily where you have these placed. The key here is looking, if you see the little arrow. Here, you're going to change the angle. And it's probably not going to be 100%. And so now, the arrow, yeah. Now is make sure you have that setting set on the show arrow. That'll make this a lot easier. The whole goal now is you're doing a forward bounce web. And so you're going to go back down, rinse and repeat. This is where I started losing my mind because I didn't do this maybe the most efficient way possible, and I just kept bouncing myself off the edge over and over again. And again, I would save the exact same one. This is not where you need to start making them super crazy. Your only goal is that as long as you... Yeah, just like that. That's going to be part of the process. And then if you haven't built, you got to come back up. All right, and so it's just this testing process over and over again is all this really comes down to. So you're going to bounce, 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 so on and so forth. I think we've accomplished what we were shooting for there. Just get back to a safe place. Let's go to this lily pad. You might want to build a little staircase up because you're probably going to fall off a lot here doing this testing. You can put a wall at the end, of course. That would probably be the slightly more intelligent way of doing this. But I did this all trial and error, and it was interesting, to say the least. But essentially, they're going to have exactly the same. So you're on 1, then 2 separate, 1, 2 separate. You're not going to really see this stuff. So I wouldn't say this is the most important thing. You could just build a brand new one or do this. At this point, you will have to sort of move these things around here and there. Could definitely do this shorter if you wanted. This will just all be personal preference. There's not really a rhyme or reason to why one thing works over the next. And then you want to get this placed. Something like that. And then it's just the same little process. This is probably the finicky part, I would call this overall, because you're sort of trying to switch directions. And I don't necessarily think that the game really wants you to do that very easily. Could go one higher, maybe even. This is on full power, yeah. And that's where you get this little thing. And then there's your floor. That's going to bounce you all the way up. We can close this off now. Sometimes it does that because it's hitting a bounce web and it doesn't want to place one, so it won't let you place any of them. You could definitely do this one shorter if you wanted to. Doesn't really matter though. And this you might have to mess with here and there, but now we're just going to do a little more testing. Yeah, unsupported, sure. All right, now we have a little stair to get up when we fall in the water endlessly. And we'll just see if this works right. And this is where you might have to mess with things. So yeah, this floor doesn't necessarily want to work. We got one problem. So this floor, I believe, should be one lower, if I remember correctly. And then you can just do like a set of stairs to get you to the correct height. Which is very similar. And this is where, I mean, your creativity gets to go crazy from here. It doesn't matter. There's nothing's perfect here. The key now is we are now up. You have made it to the top of the pagoda. I would say life does not get easier from here. Especially if you're trying to mimic mine as best as possible. What you're going to have to do now is... This is the only part of the base, this elevator shaft here, that is going to connect the lower part to the upper part. Everything else, all the other sides are essentially built totally independent of one another. So what you're going to have to do is essentially recreate this elevator shaft. So you can get the blocks up here. I like recreating it. I made them exactly the same. And then from here, you now have a platform to build from. So you can come in. Once you do that, you should now be able to delete all of this. And you now have your structure built there. And this is what allows you to now sort of continue. This is on its own grid. This is on its own grid. So on and so forth. This is what allows you is the mirror image. And I can put some images that I'll throw in when you're looking at these things. That allows you to create the edges or these corners where this part of the base meets this part of the base in the corner here. That's what allows some of the interesting roof structures that I have. It's just the pieces overlapping. From here, you just get to go crazy. You don't have to do anything. I would say this part of the base is much harder to build on, and I don't probably think most people have an interest in doing the crazy thing I did on top. Again, there's a lot of images showing every piece of this because I helped someone through images rebuild this entire base a year ago or two. Velocity, my mod, was the first person to build it. You can look through the images to get the details and the specifics, but this is going to get you essentially to that point where now you have the rough structure of the base. You have the knowledge to come around and sort of build things out of each side. And again, it's just sort of the same thing. You're going to do that. Again, being precise here, I think, does really matter. If you're off by one block, it will throw things off at the top. You want to make sure you're placing things exactly the same and duplicating this as best as possible. If you're luckily, the half blocks and vertical blocks and stuff do make this a lot easier. When I originally built it, there was no vertical half blocks. There was no quarter triangles. There was none of that fun stuff. So it evolved a lot over time. But that's all you're doing, is creating essentially a bridge that now allows you to place your first block up here. And then you get to go back and delete all of this. Oops. Sometimes you might need to build one more block, just to make sure it's properly anchored. And it just depends on how you want to build, what your plans are, what you like, what you don't like. And there you go. It's a little finicky, but then you can go back and just do this. I think you come to the back here. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, because the new updates have messed with structural integrity a little bit. So sometimes you get some weird floating stuff now, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And now you have a platform that you can go crazy from. You could build out a floor. You can do whatever you want up here. And again, all the details are shown on my base. That's essentially what I did, is I just built little staircases and made a little area and built more staircases, built another area. I would highly suggest getting one side built and then duplicating that side around everyone. Getting this side sort of the framework of it done, and then coming back to this stuff and recreating it is, I think, the way I've had the most success. If you're trying to build them all at the same time, it's really easy to get one block off. It's very nice to have like a reference image to look at. So if you finish one side, like copying my base, if you can watch the base tour, is what a lot of people did as well, to get the exact like 3 blocks, because I walk through every spot in the base at one point or another. So you'll be able to count the blocks. That's the easiest way to get a perfect reference image, just because it's a very time-consuming base to make and to like fully recreate. But at this point, you have done the vast majority of what I did. I can now show a simple sort of form of what we did at the front. This is where all the hard work, that precision that I was talking about, comes into play. If you did not do a good job doing the first parts of this base, this is where all your horrors are coming to light. This is where that precision really does matter the most. Let's do... Luckily, there is now the half floors, so the entrance got a little easier. I had to do some funny little design work to make some of this stuff work without some of the newer blocks, which is also why I highly suggest everyone build this base in their own manner. Don't just copy mine exactly, because my base was built before a lot of the really new interesting blocks were added to the game. So you are limiting yourself a lot just by trying to copy mine exactly, because there's a lot of things you can do in the game now that you couldn't do before. But these are, do a little speed build session here and just get this stuff sort of mapped out on each side, and then I'll come back and meet you in a second. Now we're back. We did a little bit more of the detailing here. This is going to be slightly different than my Pagoda Base. Minor changes here overall, but realistically, this is pretty much the exact thing. Sort of how I wish I originally built it. We're going to get a little bit complicated here because you cannot essentially create this little tower piece here perfectly around every side because they're all built on different grids, if that makes sense. So the goal now is going to be have to find these points where these things are going to meet. And this is where it's going to be a little bit of trickery because you're working on different grids. You're essentially going to be hiding some of these little minor details to get things to line up properly. It's a bit of a challenge, I will say. Let's see. Is that right? Yeah. I think mine overall, the path is about too wide. So you can do something like this to get the idea. Again, this is where you see your flaws, your mistakes in a major way. You see where things are not lined up properly. You learn very quickly when they're not lined up properly. That is probably the biggest struggle of this base, is that these are where all the flaws that I was talking about come to light. You're looking at mine where something like this. This is where you're going to get some weirdness, for sure. Especially as we were maybe building this a little quick, you're going to end up with these details if you don't line things up absolutely centered and absolutely as perfect as possible. There are ways that you can sort of come in and do these details at different spots and they might line up better, but you can already see my lack of precision on lining those pieces up that I was talking about leads to these little issues. The further out you go, the further that becomes an issue. If you look like, stick to this block, we actually did, I would say, pretty good. Maybe we didn't. We didn't do that good. That's just a half block, so we just do this. You can get it to line up. This is the struggle. But yeah, they would essentially meet in the right spot if we can get this thing to sit where we want it to. And this is where that off-grid building becomes a little bit more stressful once you get to the outside here. A little bit more work, a little bit more precision. Because again, that's like not on the right grid. And we want this maybe one over. See if we can get, there we go. And sometimes that's what you have to do. But overall, not bad placement. My original one was a little bit better. I think getting the main wall that you see as your front entrance is key here. It's absolutely key. That will determine sort of everything moving forward, is how well you place that first wall. And then from there, you kind of live with your mistakes. So precision is key here. And then what we're doing essentially is this piece of this wall we have here. You've got nothing on this side, tower on this side. You're going to replicate this over and over again. So it's the same process. I think we have that wall. So there's 2 walls there. Separation. You're going to get that and that. Great thing is now you have these vertical half walls, which just absolutely change the game. And you can come in and now do all this detailing. And then it's going to get a little funky here again, because you're essentially now replicating the same thing. You have an empty side that clips into this, then you have a tower. So this tower is now going to be built off of this. Probably want to go one more, just a vertical wall. Make sure you've got the spacing and everything lined up correctly as well. It's very, very easy to start messing this up. I think we even want to go one more maybe. Maybe just a half wall. And if you look at mine, essentially what happens is you place these upper ones, and then you leave this block as a gap, and then you can just fill it in like so. Come on now. There we go. So that'll get you that basic structure. And then it's sort of a rinse and repeat process. So you're going to come in with your full wall. Easiest way is to make sure you're placed on this grid that you're working on. These are all supposed to be in the center. There we go. And did I build that one off? No, that's right. Just a half block spacing, half block spacing, half block spacing, which means we probably need to move these one over to potentially a full vertical wall there. Something like that. And we haven't quite placed all this correctly yet. With patience and perseverance, you can really start to hide some of these details. It does, unfortunately, just take effort to get them to work properly. The more OCD you are in this portion of the build, the better. Because it's gets a little weird. And if you're not used to building sort of weird, it can kind of mess with you a little bit. The Velocity, my mod, who I helped originally build this for the first time, got quite frustrated the very first time he built it. So you can do little things like that. You might notice some of those things. That is just part of the process of this build. I think you do have to let go of this sort of perfectionist mentality if you want to do this stuff. I think in my base we didn't do this. You can also come back and delete these stairs now, unless you have an entrance. They're just to get the right placement to be accurate over and over again. So you can kind of do that. This might destroy all that. Yeah, well, that's happened sometimes. And that slowly will go away. I think it's a good example to show everyone that, like, that doesn't mean that your whole base is going to fall. It just means that you just needed a couple more pieces built. So I tend to come very simple, just go back and do it again. And rinse and repeat once again. Start from scratch there. And you can see, so like this one is not necessarily an entrance, so we can just kind of do that. Hide our crimes with a vertical half wall. These will never be perfect. You cannot get these to line up absolutely 100% perfect. It is all a bit of an illusion, this whole base. So you're just doing it as best as you can. There's sometimes, I mean, you might be able to do it from like here and get things to line up. It's a process that you really have to kind of toy with and figure out how you want things to work. But we'll just finish these off, and then I'll catch you guys in a second. And this is where, if you want to create a better illusion, you can build the front side here without essentially copying that. It's easier to show you essentially how I built that by just building this replicated piece without it. You can make the front one here exactly the same. Built on this same grid, just helps create maybe a slightly more precise build overall, which for some of you might make a difference. For others, you may not care enough. Does sort of mess with some things. Your grids might just mess up a little bit because of that. This could use one more, I think. Just get rid of this and do a full wall on the wrong grid. It's definitely where it's trial and error to get some of these parts correct. Not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to build, as you're building with so many different grids. But it will give you a slightly better effect in the front, at least. If images and taking pictures and making a certain part of it look perfect to you makes a big difference, you can think of it that way. Otherwise, you can kind of just have it go where it goes, and it'll work. Again, this base is, when you're building off grid, it's not about perfection. It's about getting it as close as you can everywhere. But overall, I mean, you could definitely see how the effect starts to come together. And from there, my base was just building some ramps, building a big, giant bridge out to there. Luckily, a lot of these things sort of just work, so you can kind of just come out and be like, oh, I liked his bridge that went out to the tree log to get sap. And you can just do that. You can place it wherever you want. It can be over here if you like that better, and you can do something massive, and you can do that, whatever. This is now, I think at this point, your playground. I know I didn't get into a lot of the details on the top. I think that part is extremely complicated and is more of a one-on-one basis situation to get it built properly. We'd be here for a very long time trying to get it completely perfectly rebuilt. So in my opinion, I'm just going to leave that one. If you're really, really interested in copying that part of the base, again, please join my Discord. I think everyone would be very, very surprised at how many images on there we have of this base, which makes it so much easier to recreate it with the images. They show off every single angle, every piece of it, all the inner details, the little things you may like. And hopefully you can come see those, and maybe that inspires you to maybe change things up a little bit. Again, I've seen some just phenomenal recreations of this base where we helped someone get about this far, and then they took it and ran with it. Even if you just take this inside or just the outside, I mean, you can do whatever you want from here on out. I think this is a great basis to now leap off of and go build more cool things for it. I think the inside of this base particularly is very interesting. At this point, you could probably go back and delete a lot of the stuff. I use this floor. I don't actually use the burr floor on the bottom level, so not necessary to go that route unless that's what you like. If you are trying to recreate it as perfect as possible, you are going to run into a couple issues that I've noticed. A couple of the blocks, like the flower petal bed and a couple of the other beds, don't quite function properly anymore. They don't like being placed in certain areas, and so you might struggle with some of the inside details if you're looking at my base overall. But for the most part, you've now done everything, and you would just come in and do some of these details. This is where you can start kind of hiding some of your crimes. Call them crimes in the sense like little mistakes where maybe you didn't line it up perfectly in the beginning and you don't want to start over. This is where some of those half blocks can really start to kind of fill things in and help reduce some of the frustration and stuff. So it's a little finicky. My stuff is not perfect. I know in the videos it might look like it, but this is where a lot of the sides look like this. Some of them line up perfect, some of them will not. The more time you spend in the beginning, the better the outside will look in the long run, for sure. So spend more time. You can't spend too much time getting the first part done correctly. Getting those first parallel blocks placed perfectly centered, perfectly lined up, so everything kind of works the way you want. You can adjust this. You could push those blocks forward and do these proud of this and sort of get this effect of only seeing the mushroom instead of the cement, and maybe you line it up so you just see these corners, which would look really cool. There's a lot of potential now that you can do, and you essentially have a completely blank slate on the inside, which I think I'm very excited to see how some people come and kind of take this idea and make it their own. Because at the end of the day, I think there are not many places in the game that offer quite this interesting of a base. I think a lot of people like building on the tree and all that stuff. I like the uniqueness of the Pagoda Base specifically, I think, is what drew me to it. You also, probably the best thing, you have a field station inside your base forever now. Like, this is now your field station. My bed is placed somewhere right around here. If you can't get the flower petal beds to work, unfortunately, that's just something that the devs have not finished yet, or fixed yet. It's not much you can do about it. I've seen the issue in more places than just this. For some reason, yeah, the floor, for some reason, no longer allows you. This happens on pretty much any pre-built structure in the game at the moment with the beds, specifically just the fancier ones. I think it's just the bunk bed, yeah. The bunk bed and the flower petal bed no longer placed perfectly, which I noticed. If you want to recreate the inner details, my base tours have some build portions that show off like the little smithing station, little build lapses and stuff. And it's just kind of your playground now. You get to come in and do whatever fun nonsense you want to do. You can change everything. You can customize anything. You can build the floors taller. You can build them shorter. It's really, now at this point, you're free to go and do anything with this base. I think those are the kind of covered the most complicated portions of the entire thing. I think you can get away with doing something like this potentially for these beds now. I wanted to test for you guys. If you place now, unfortunately, they're just weird these days. I think foundations work, from what I had seen. Someone else had done some testing. You place foundations, might get a slightly better effect naturally. Again, this is also where my top 10 build tips, rotating blocks, if they're not letting you place them, sometimes it's just pushing them in and out, messing with them. You saw that go blue for a second. That's all it takes sometimes. Persistence is key in grounded building systems. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't understand the issue with the pedal beds anymore. They're just not going to work. If you figure that out, let me know. Because I would definitely like to help some people that have been struggling with that. Otherwise, you're kind of stuck with one of these beds. I don't know why those other ones just don't work properly anymore. And I saw people struggling in other ways other than just placing them here, so it might just be a function of those being glitching out a little bit, unfortunately. Which is a bit of a bummer, but you now have creative freedom to just kind of go and build anything. Please leave a comment if you have any questions, if you love it, if I didn't go over a specific part. Feel free to ask. I love helping people get these things built as best as I can. I think we've touched on the vast majority of problem areas, the difficult pieces being the elevator, these outer towers, getting the original walls placed. Everything from there is just kind of standard building. The upper roof, again, it's the same thing. They're just clipping into the corner. The more you build outside of the pagoda, the more the alignment is going to become a problem. So do it with a grain of salt when you're doing it. Think of it with a grain of salt and just Don't expect things to be absolutely perfect because it's very difficult. As you can see, the vast majority of my corners do not meet up quite perfect. It's a game of just messing with things. Luckily, with these new blocks, you can sort of come in and do something like that. And that's one way that you can sort of fix the little things. It just takes persistence at this point now. It's all you really need. Persistence to want it to be as perfect as possible. In a lot of spaces, I had gaps like this, and I just kind of came back and maybe filled them like that. It's not perfect, but those are the things you kind of have to deal with when you build the base like this. All right, that's going to wrap up this base build guide for the lower portion of the Pagoda Base. I know I didn't necessarily touch the entire upper portion. It is one of the most complicated parts of the entire build. So if you would like me to do a part 2 where I dive into the upper portion of the base, make sure you hit that like button, drop a comment below letting me know. And if there's enough support and people asking for it, I'll definitely make that happen for you guys. Also, if there's any smaller details in this build that I didn't necessarily cover in the video that you'd like to create in your own builds, don't forget to check out my Discord. That's linked in the description below. I put a massive library of images for you to browse with every other single part of this base build documented there. Plus, you can reach out to me personally if you have any questions about your builds, design ideas, games you'd like to see me play on the channel. But otherwise, I really appreciate everyone watching. As always, happy building, and I'll see you on the next one.